Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Tayte and Ayman for another spoiler discussion. Arguably the spoiler discussion to be having this year, arguably of all the films that are going to be coming out and what's got sequels and what hasn't. This is our spoiler discussion for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, now out in cinemas worldwide, which we think a lot of people have seen. We have all seen it, a couple of us more than once. But before we get into any of that stuff, how are we all doing tonight?
Fantastic, because I have seen this film. I know we had a long and large discussion about all of the films that we were excited to see over the entire year, and this one was definitely both towards the top of our lists. But I just can't wait to kind of get into the nitty-gritty about it and just talk about all the spoilers, just all the discussions we're going to have coming up to release of Beyond after this film.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I mean, I'm good generally, but yeah, better the fact that we're going to talk about this film, because this is one of the top films of the year for me.
100%, and that's going to be kind of interesting, I think, with this discussion, because this is out now and it is a sequel 4.5 years after the original came out. Of course, this one was delayed with COVID, with the part 2, of course, also in simultaneous production. But we want to hear from everybody at home. So if you are watching it live, if you're joining us live, please do comment below with your thoughts on Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. If you like this video, if you like what we're up to, then you can, of course, get involved, hit the subscribe button, comment along. If you're not watching live, you're watching later on, still let us know your thoughts and we'll reply to those as and when they go up. And if you want to find out about other videos we're doing, what else we've got on the channel, best thing to do is find us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at cinema_savvy, Facebook levels.com/cinemasavvy, with a link to Redbubble in that description below. But over to you first, Tate. Just a quick one for you and Ayman. Thoughts on the first Spider-Verse film, just leading into this?
Yep, a fantastic film, one of the best animated films of recent years. It's changed the animation game in general. Every film is trying to copy the art style, the kind of the comic book nature that it gives off for the film itself, the fact that it feels like you're watching an actual comic book come to life, whereas previously you were just watching, a film that was, animated in the style. It has just gone and revolutionized kind of what it can be to be an animated film, and really brought kind of forward that point that animation is cinema and should be recognized for the art form that it is.
Yeah, I mean, initially on the first one, I missed the boat on it. I didn't go to watch it in the cinema. I watched it a year or two after it came out. I was just looking for something to watch, and I thought, I haven't watched this, I'll watch it, and was absolutely blown away. I mean, just everything about just Tate just mentioned the animation, like the animation and the art style on it is so different compared to sort of the other animated films that you get. It's really unique, and I think that's what brought in a lot of people as well. It's just that art style is so different. When you talk about art style and animation, people tend to think about like kiddie films, like the Disney ones and stuff like that. But this one is a lot more. It's so different that it brings in a lot more people, I reckon.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of sticking in with that, that first one, it has changed how we see animated films, how we do animated films, how I think people are more perceptive to them, not just Oscar stuff. But I think an animated Spider-Man film on paper was a pretty tough sell to a mass market, to a market where there's been live action Spider-Man films. Even with Miles Morales, there was always talk, would we ever get him in live action? Of course, Donald Glover popped up in Spider-Man Homecoming as well, and I think for many years he'd always wanted to play Miles Morales. He was one of the big like actors to start campaigning for characters as soon as those comics started. I think in the early 2010s, I think the character began. And again, full credit to Sony Animation, Phil Lord, Chris Miller, everyone involved in that first film for making it the way they did, not just doing a generic, here's the 3D animated Spider-Man film. It felt like an animated comic book come to life. And the concept of the multiverse, which I still maintain that film is the reason why Marvel have started doing them more, why we even had No Way Home, was because of Spider-Verse working. They wanted to make that jump to live action. They didn't. Kind of heading into that second film as well, just my initial thoughts on it. I saw it for the first time on Thursday. I saw it again this morning. Absolutely loved it, every moment of it, and it is quite comfortably my film of the year so far by a country mile. There might be a couple of things that could leapfrog it maybe this year, but it's going to be a struggle, I think, to see a better film, if I'm being completely honest. And especially on that second viewing, with there being so much more to take in That's what's caught me off guard. I'm just going to quickly bring up a comment by Dave for Evening Gents. Not to give away, but he loved the film. He absolutely loved it, which is great to see as well. So, I'm going to say the same thing. I've not people I actually know. I've not seen anyone that's seen this and disliked it. And I think that's the key here, is that it's very universally accessible. I think a film like this.
I mean, my kind of initial thoughts after seeing it were just, first of all, I needed a minute to take it in. It completely blew me away. I had very high expectations for this film. Purely out of kind of, the reputation that it's set from its first film. I was wondering how they can expand the universe, extend it out, make it better. And this film, I'm going to say, tops the first film. I believe this film to be better than Into the Spider-Verse. I think this has taken it to a whole new level. It's upgraded in every area that it could have upgraded in. It's more visually striking. The storyline is more streamlined and better. It has a really direct purpose in the plot. The character development in this film is phenomenal. Exactly what you'd want from a sequel. You don't want to be focusing on that origin anymore. You really want to be dialing in to the characters and really getting into the heart of what makes a good story, which is the relationships that people build, the sacrifice that people have to make. And, it's very, very tough to rank it amongst the Spider-Man films, but my initial thought was it's got to be up there. It has to be up there, near the top or at the top. I'm saying it now. I need to watch it again. I will be going to watch it again, but this for me is only going to get better on rewatch, and I just think it's a phenomenal piece of cinema. Going to be very, very difficult to top this year. I know there are already possible conversations that people are having, early reviewers are having, and stuff like that, of not just having the best animated feature in the bag, but a possible Best Picture nomination in the works. The first one since Toy Story 3 for an animated film. It'd be a hard push, but Inside Out, of course, you're right. But it's a rarity in general, a very, very rare occasion, that films get nominated for that. And I think this one could push that boundary.
Yeah, I mean, I watched it twice. So I watched on Thursday, and then I ended up going Friday evening to watch it again. And initially I was blown away. But I think on second viewing as well, it's very, very rarely where I do like films on the second watch, but this one it gets better on the second watch, because you notice things more on the second watch that makes sense. But yeah, it's just the initial thought is like the art style for the different sort of universes is so different. Like I'm sure we'll get into it later, but like Universe 42, that art style is very different compared to the art style for Miles's original universe, or the universe where it's the Indian Peter Parker, stuff like that. It's just all of that sort of stuff brings it all together and makes it such a good film, basically. But yeah, it does top my list. It's in the top 3 for Spider-Man films.
I think I've got it quite comfortably sat with Spider-Man 2, ironically, both sequels. Those two, I think, A Country Mile, the best two Spider-Man films, and I'd say Into the Spider-Verse and Spider-Man 1 probably then sit as the next best ones, ironically, both the best origin films. And I'd go so far as to say that this would probably sit there at the top of like comic book films, if that is a genre, if people want to call it a genre. I've had a weird letterbox list running for a few years. I think there's like well over 100 films now, and it's got like the worst of the worst that sit on there. And this is certainly one that would I see it the third time at cinema? I can't rule it out just because there's a lot. If this had come out 6 weeks ago, when there was no films out, I think I'd be watching this more than twice at the cinema. So we'll see. But it was interesting going again today, Sunday afternoon. Yes, it's opening weekend, but variety of ages, variety of people, all there, parents with kids. People were pointing up at the PlayStation game bit, which I recognised. And there's so much to take into watching a film like this. And it's full credit to the animators, to the producers. Like, I did sit here thinking today, like, if you pause every frame of this entire film, they could release that as a book, and it would probably be one of the nicest books I've ever seen in my life. That's how good the animation and the approach this was. And once again, I know this happens more in the games industry than the film industry, but when people see these delays of these films they're looking forward to and stuff like this, it's being delayed for the right reasons, that they need to get it right creatively, whether it's not finished, whether it not looks done. And something I don't want to go and hit home about Marvel being Marvel, but how many Marvel films recently has there been like a patch at the cinema where they've had to re-update the VFX 2 weeks after the film's already come out? And No Way Home was one of the biggest crimes for that. And this one again today, it is perfect. Every single image, every frame, the approach to it, and kind of if we kickstart with that, we start going through. So what we'll do for this spoiler review, we're going to go through the film, not scene by scene, but we've got the big moments, and within those moments, those parts of the film, it's 2 hours 20. I believe one of the longest animated films ever made. They're also saying that should cover the characters, the events, and then we'll round out with a discussion about Beyond next year. Dave, my son, cried at the end because he couldn't watch the final part, and you know what? I think there's going to be some Empire Strikes Back comparisons today. It's certainly what I noticed a lot more in that second viewing. But that being said, I want to kickstart with a talk about prologues. Tate, do you think this is beat No Time to Die's 21-minute opening sequence? Because I was waiting for the film to start, and then obviously, it's Gwen. And then we realize, we're in her world. Then it's like, she's not doing the intro yet. We're getting a whole, what could be like a short film that could be a TV episode in between them, setting up the events this perfectly. If we talk about that opening, I want to immediately talk about the animation. I know we've sort of spoke about the different animation for each universe. I've just got to say, I don't know. I know in the first one, and I did watch it a few weeks ago, we didn't really get to spend time in the other dimensions or the other multiverses. And it is no easy task. And this is why I'm hoping they do really campaign this for best film. Just on the animation, ignore the story, ignore that it's Spider-Man. They're in however many multiverses in this film, and there is almost it's not a different animation studio, but the different approach that every universe has, frame rates, design, the characters, the movement, the frames per second. They get the start right with Gwen, because I know we got a little bit of time with her in that last one, like a couple of seconds in her world. But with this film and this one, you can see that here's what we've been doing for a few years. This is how her world looks. It doesn't look the same as the first one you watched a couple of weeks ago because it's the different universe. This is where she's from. And aside from the relationship with the father, which we'll get into, I just was sort of wowed off the get-go at how different this was going to be. And then one thing they've obviously done is the character of Gwen in this, obviously, there's like crippling depression with her relationship, the use of colors that they use as well to animate her relationship with her dad, whether they use like blue when she's feeling like the warmth, the red when they're apart. I believe that apparently some of the comics of hers are like this. Now, I've never read a Spider-Gwen comic. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm some comic expert on Spider-Man. I read the same obvious ones that everyone would have read when they were younger. The Venom ones, the Green Goblin ones, not the modern stuff. And I loved the opening. And I actually think in terms of how this film starts and ends, they absolutely nailed it by starting with Gwen. That we should be kickstarting with her because she is going to be the glue that leads this film into that next one as well.
I absolutely agree. It's almost like in this film, she is kind of the co-lead character, whereas in the previous film, she was not a side character, but, like a supporting cast member to Miles's journey. And in this film, opening with her, having her interactions and seeing her side of the story, how she's had to try and readjust in her own universe, how she's coming up against her own problems and stuff like that, and trying to compare that back to Miles and having those flashbacks to Miles as well. And, her wanting to be with her friend. It's such an emotional start to the film. And it's such a kind of good way to lead you in. And it kind of leads you into that kind of thoughts and thinking of, oh, so this is going to be the dark film. Nice. Kind of like they're going to be absolutely just hitting you in the gut every single time with all of these emotional beats throughout the entire story. And as far as the art direction is concerned, absolutely phenomenal. I loved the pastel colors, the bleeding colors into the image, the backgrounds changing based on the mood, the lighting, just everything about this film, especially with the Gwen sequences, was just gorgeous to look at. It was just so well put together, and it's so nice that we're able to see her universe It's really nice how they've been able to just kind of develop across the films. Into the Spider-Verse had the universes come to Miles, and this time it's the one where we explore. It's the one where we really go out there and see the different places, enjoy the different worlds and stuff like that. And this is kind of where a lot of films have fallen flat on their kind of multiverse stories so far. I mean, Everything Ever All at Once absolutely nailed it, but most other films, they just don't quite get it. Either they show very, very small clips of the millions upon billions upon endless possibilities that we can have with the character designs, with the atmosphere, with all of the staging, everything that you'd get from the multiverse. Or you get just those little kind of drops of, oh, this is someone from somewhere else, but he looks exactly the same. It's just, it doesn't fit in properly. This film genuinely is trying to make you believe that there is multiple, endless different varieties of everyone involved. The fact we've only seen still, I think it's listed down as like over 200 different versions of Spider-Man or Spider-People, 280 versions of Spider-Man in this film, plus 95 of them are unique and named characters. We've only seen maybe a handful of universes so far that have actually been visualized, and we're going to get more. We're always going to get more. We're going to continue to build and see more as, you know, the next film comes across. And the fact they've put that as a possibility just with this film and just with this opening sequence, showing us this other world, showing us this character development straight off the bat, it just sets up the film for everything that we're going to be looking forward to.
Yeah, I think especially so with the first one, you get the Miles prologue, and then I think with Gwen, because she is essentially one of the main characters in this one, so to have her sort of origin, like sort of set up in that, and then or the relationship that she has with her dad and how she's torn on that is probably what a lot of other, I imagine, Spider people have, is that they want to tell their family but they can't, and it's just one of those ones that's very difficult. And again, the art style, I mean, to have her own art style in her own universe, but then have the art style for the Renaissance Vulture sort of blend into that, it's just so really well done. And then when Spider-Man 2099 and Spider-Woman appear, and having their own, like Spider-Man 2099 has those sort of like neon webs, it's just, it blends together so really, like, so well that you can tell that the studio and the animators put a lot of time and like sort of effort and love into making this film as good as it can, and not have it sort of be, okay, this is our release date, we're going to rush out the door. They've taken time to sort of make it look perfect and sort of blend everything together really well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought the Vulture, because that was one thing I wasn't necessarily nervous about, but I tried to stay away from a lot of trailers for this. I tried to stay away from casting announcements. I know they're doing a few more before this came out. And like I said, I'm not going to be the person that knows every character. There is, I mean, someone please prove me wrong. I don't believe there's been a comic book iteration of a Renaissance era Spider-Man. I could be completely wrong, but
I don't think so.
Just to have that in the intro to set things up of, again, we're going to do something in multiverse. Like, how boring would it have been if it had been animated Michael Keaton? You know, it would be so boring. But the fact they've got something insanely creative, again, a different frame rate interacting with other frame rates in the same sequence, how they've even designed the character. You know, when he comes on screen, you have like equations popping up at the corners. And I know it's designed as like a comic panel, but I absolutely love the fact they went with a character like this first, a character like the Vulture that everyone's familiar with, change it up. And then if you haven't seen the first one, which is a terrible decision heading into this, you'll understand the concept of a multiverse by that moment. That does not belong there. It's just as simple as that. It doesn't belong. And to build an incredible action sequence off there, then bring in Miguel O'Hara, Oscar Isaac playing Spider-Man 2099, which is amazing. Daniel Pemberton's score, I've been listening to all across the weekends. They go proper Italian Renaissance with the Vulture scenes. Gwen's got her drum beat, and then Miguel O'Hara's got the futuristic synths. The blending of all that together just makes it so much more entertaining, and kind of what you said there, Tate, that it feels believable that they're going all the way with the concept of a multiverse. the concept of the multiverse is it should be infinite. It's an infinite amount of universes. We'll never know. Anything can be different. And you're right, and not enough films have been able to do it in a way. I understand some films will be shackled by, budget, by live action, by visual effects artists, but you see something like this and it just wipes the floor with whatever other people are planning on doing, and hopefully encourages others to be more creative if they are, directing and whatnot, or if they're producing, they're going to let their filmmakers make films that are finished rather than just release them. So I thought that opening was perfect, and setting up the Stacey story, even on that first viewing before you clock, the canon event. The second viewing, when you realize that, it's a Captain Stacey still, and it's a canon event for the captain to die. Obviously, you shouldn't know that at this point, but it's a really interesting way to look into their relationship as the film goes on. And I love the fact that, Peter Parker's death, I don't know if that's part of the comics that in her world he turned into like a lizard thing.
It does.
Okay, and I liked that, and I thought it was a great way to have a differing Peter Parker, because I know the first one hinted at it that Peter Parker was the one that she'd lost, but it's the perfect opening 20 minutes to set things up, to say, okay, this is where this character's going, these are the other people. And then it's now let's bring in Mars. Now let's have this film begin properly, because the title card drops then, and you kind of forget because I'm so invested at this point. But what an amazing intro sequence. And we've got lots to talk about today. But has anyone got anything more they want to say about the prologue before we get into, I guess I current timeline, the current verse?
I mean, it's just a good action sequence, isn't it? It's a very, very well animated action sequence.
Yeah, and it leads directly from the previous one as well, because the Renaissance Vulture starts glitching as well, so okay, he's glitching for that reason that he's not meant to be there. It's just one of those ones where it's sort of setting up that it's a quite direct continuation from the first one.
Yeah, no, I can say that 100%. And kind of talking Mars, let's bring him back. So as I kind of said, I was expecting because also even before we get to Gwen, when the Sony logo starts popping up and Phil Lord and Miller now have their own opening sequence, it kind of gets you in the mood with the music they're picking. But when Miles comes back into it, we've of course, this is going to be an interesting thing to talk about. We're going to sort of kickstart his relationship with his parents, what's going on, because we'll bring you this into as the spot after. But when we were talking earlier, we sort of said, is this the best Spider-Man film? We said that pretty early. One of the reasons why I think this film succeeds in that conversation is because if you look at the best, not even Spider-Man films, but if you look at the character of Spider-Man, and I think even when Stanley speaks about creating him, the concept was always that he is a normal person. He is not financially well off. He's not a rich billionaire. He's the everyday person that's struggling with a work-life balance that can't do anything right. But it's the burden of playing this character. Now, this film, I didn't think it would go in as well into this as it did, and this does a phenomenal job of doing it throughout, but it sets up the Miles family relationship issues from the get-go. And I think when we talk about sequels, it's very easy to say things need to be bigger, things need to be better. But the best sequels are the sequels that actually develop the characters further, especially in the superhero genre, right? If you have a great origin, you've done that character justice. You've put them in a position in the film where they can be the superhero. But then we need to see their struggles as we move past that. It's why films like The Dark Knight have perfectly delivered. Spider-Man 2, a lot of those types of films end up at the top of this, and it's because of character arcs. The Miles relationship with his parents, even before we know it's going to cripple down to him finding out his dad's brackets needs to die in 2 days' time, I think they did a very good job at building them up from that first film. And I feel like a year has passed, and he's struggling with the burden of telling them, he's not lying for the sake of it. He doesn't want to lie to his parents, but he knows he has to. And that's where that Gwen prologue comes back into it, where she's done the talk and it's not worked out in her favor, which is going to, of course, put other people off doing it. So before we get into the spot, just both of you, what are your thoughts on his relationship in this film with the parents and where that sets up as the film progresses?
Like I said previously, kind of plot-driven films where you really kind of go heavy into the character development and stuff. It's just so well done. It's so well done. And this doesn't work if the first film isn't good. simply put. If you don't have that initial kind of groundwork put in there, the relationship between himself and his dad, looking for approval and stuff like that, even the conversation at the end of Into the Spider-Verse where he kind of chats to him over the phone, says he's okay, kind of apologizes for not talking, and then goes over and has the conversation as Spider-Man. It sets the groundwork for that kind of relationship. He can talk to him like a normal human being, like he would want him to as Spider-Man, but he can't talk to him in the same way as, you know, Miles Morales. He just can't have that same relationship. And even though he kind of, and throughout this film, we learned that he's going to go and reveal basically who he is to his mum before he does to his dad. It's because maybe he still has that doubt over his dad. He knows the fate of his dad is possibly coming nigh. At the early point in the film, that relationship with his mum is maybe a little bit closer than the relationship with his dad. You could even see the early signs of that when his mum has the chat with him on the rooftop and everything like that. But there's an awful lot of just hard work put in at the start of this film to put all the characters back into the right place and set ourselves up for this 2-film arc. And that's just down to the writing. And, you know, Lord and Miller, they smash it every single time. All the writers involved in this film just have nailed it once again, just like they did with the first film.
Yeah, I think with Miles and the relationship that he has with his parents, like, you can tell that it's a little bit strained because they're very, not confrontational, but they're not on the same wavelength. Miles has these secrets that he's trying to keep to himself, but it's hard because he wants to tell his parents, but he knows that it's not the right decision. And like the fact that they're talking, like the fact that his mom's worried about him moving away to Princeton, and which is in New Jersey, which isn't that far from Brooklyn, but the fact that she always wants him home, like it's just showing the sort of the relationship that they have is that his mom, like he is his mom's little boy basically, but he's the one that wants to grow up and sort of move out, and he knows that he's having. He knows he's putting himself in dangerous situations every day. It's just that he can't tell his mom that because that will then escalate things even further. And like the fact that the conversations that he's having with his dad whilst he's Spider-Man as well, is just so different to the way that his dad treats him differently as well. He treats Spider-Man as his own character and Miles as a separate person when we know in fact that they are the same person. So it's just really interesting, their dynamic.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, that if you don't have that stuff work, you know, when we get to the ending of the film, which we'll talk about later on, the ending of the film will not work if you haven't invested in the relationship, where the characters are left wondering what's going to happen, because we'll get to the end later, as I said, but if nothing before it's working, you're not going to have that at the end. You're not going to care. You're not going to have stakes. You're not going to think about that part two. You're not going to think about, is this character going to go or not? They've set it up so well. And I think that's a really important thing heading into this. And kind of even in time of that, talking about the Spot, a character, a villain I knew almost nothing about. And I'll even go so far as say that when this was announced, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, when I'm sure some people were thinking, are we going to get the Sinister Six? We're going to get this, we're going to get that. It feels so on point that they went with a character like the Spot. Now, for all intents and purposes, yes, it's not a big name, right? But give it 6 months, and people will be talking about this character in ways that haven't been in. There'll probably be another comic series with this character, because the one thing I've always found fascinating, going back to a lot of the failures of Sony and how they did Spider-Man 3, is by putting characters into films creates a new limelight for that character. That's why they become even more famous in the sense of villains, because you're bringing in actors to play them, you're bringing in them on a cinematic scale. And no one wants to keep seeing the same things over and over and over again. Yes, there are key characters that will always pop up, like the Joker. But then you think about the Batman Rob Pattinson last year, we didn't need the Joker in that film. He was there because it's iconography to be in that film. And, having someone like, Red Door's played by Jim Carrey, of course, but, if we're going to get someone different in that Batman sequel, I know I'm completely off point here, but loads of people spoke about characters like Mr. Freeze because, yeah, they've popped up once before in a film, but there's a way to use this character to fix that world, to be involved in their cinematic approach. And the Spot, I think, is genuinely, of all the Spider-Man villains I can think of in my head, I cannot think of one that might have been better than this film. And when we get to the ending, I'll talk about a couple of, not theories, but certainly in Earth 42, there's a very interesting cartel that was named, which we'll talk about. But yeah, Jason Schwartzman voicing the Spot as well, which was, again, they didn't go for a big A-lister in any of these voice roles, and I've got to give them credit for that. How many animated films these days think, hey, we've got a second one, let's bring on The Rock, let's bring on, maybe not Vin Diesel, but, you know, how easy is it for a popular animated film to come in? And I know that Pixar's done this route where they're going for those bigger names, and if they can actually voice act, go for it. But Jason Schwartzman's the Spot, I think, is immediately an icon. He's very funny. He isn't a credible threat to begin with. And then what this film has done so perfectly, like the characters they're developing, they are developing this villain to actually be, you know, his nemesis, as he says from the get-go. Yeah. And even one step further, that, you know, you're the guy, you created me, I created you. And, you know, Miles is on the joke, he's laughing, of course. But when you actually get the revelations of their background, to me, linking it to that first film, that it all still played an important part, that it's going to play an important part moving forward, I just have to hand it to them. The animation approach to him and their creative approach to putting him in a film, as a character that could just have multiple portals, that isn't just jumping between them, that we're getting interesting fight sequences, you know, with the foot kicking himself up the arse, stuff like that. It was a great way, I think, to bring him on. But where did you guys stand with him, like, as a villain? Because again, you know, on paper, I'm sure on Thursday, the back of my mind, I was like, yeah, I bet Kingpin's going to turn up later on. Obviously, he didn't. But it's nice that it isn't just those familiar things with this sequel.
So, having seen the film, I had to go and research the Spot a little bit just to actually find out kind of, how often does he appear in comic books? Is he ever seen as a real credible threat? And apparently the way it's worked is he was always seen as a joke character. And then if you actually stop for a second and think about his powers, it's actually really dark and twisted. And he's actually incredibly powerful. And that's exactly how they played out in this film. They put him forward as kind of like a comedic relief character towards the start, a villain of the week, kind of like, oh, Miles been doing this for a year now. He just kind of goes through these people. He always sorts out in the end. And then to finally kind of have that revelation of, okay, you created me, I created you kind of thing. And what I can say is I don't even know if it's retcon, if they ever had it intentionally that way, that the bagel would be so important being thrown. I've seen memes of people putting up, like, I've seen 2 films that have the multiverse changed around a bagel, like if I had a nickel for every time. But no, they turn a character who is kind of ha-ha funny at the start, kicking his own ass, into pure nightmare fuel at the end of it. I had kids worried in my screening by the imagery that was put forward by the Spot towards the end. That is going to scar them for life. It's so well put together and so well done. And it's how you build up a villain, how you build up a nemesis. You know, you don't have to have them a joke character at the start, but you want them to be feared by the end of it. You want them to actually feel like they're a credible threat. And the fact that, you know, at the start of the film, he just takes him on by himself. In the middle of the film, we have like 3 or 4 spider people kind of taking him on. And by the end of the film, like, you know that they're going to have every single version of Spider-Man coming after the Spot in that final film, and he's still probably going to come out on top on most of them. And it's just another story beat that links back to Miles, links back to the main character. Something that I haven't even mentioned up until this point. There isn't a single wasted scene in this film. There isn't a single line of dialogue that's throwaway. There isn't a single frame that's throwaway as well. Everything is pitch perfect, beautiful. Everything is written for a purpose. Every character is linked together. And that's how you do a film. That's how you do a perfect sequel.
Yeah, I think the Spot is just such a... His use and his powers fit perfectly into this film because of his dimension jumping abilities. It wouldn't really work if you had something like, the Green Goblin or someone like that, it wouldn't really work because he's not about jumping dimensions. And like the fact that his growth throughout the film, like when we first see him, he's struggling to rob an ATM. He's getting chased around by the shopkeeper, so he's not a credible threat. And then at the end, like that, yeah, he is nightmare fuel. Like the change, not even in his appearance, but the tones and his mannerisms that you do see briefly. It's just so. It shows you that he is a credible threat. Like he's going to bring something to the next film, and it is going to be bad for a lot of the characters. But yeah, it's just, and the fact that he is comedic as well. Like he is struggling with his powers, but I think the thing that changes him the most is the fact that he takes a real bad offense to being called villain of the week by Miles Morales. Like he takes that personally to his chest, and the fact that he's like, no, I am your nemesis. I'm going to prove you wrong. And then when he kicks himself into his own spot and realizes, oh, I can do this, then it's just a sort of mental switch where he's like, okay, this is what I'm going to do to get more power. I am going to prove to you that I am not a villain of the week. It's just so really well done.
Yeah, and I think that's what's important when you think about something like this as well, that the animation style is the big thing with the Spot that I love. That, you know, he starts out in Miles's world as we get him, and then by the end of that film, you mentioned Nightmare Fuel. It's like it's stop motion almost, their approach to him, and it's like the what do you call it, like a cartoon drawing, right? That everything's black and white with him, and that actually you get to that final shot, and there's no white left on his body now. He is completely all of the verses. He has absorbed these powers from everywhere, and he's going to, you know, bring it to Spider-Man's world, which he knows. And one thing I loved, and it's again that animation ingenuity, is when we have that sequence of him discovering his powers. I guess it's the first like cameo type thing, right? We get the shopkeeper from the Venom films, and that's the first time like, oh, okay, a reference. And I was like, don't want to see Tom Hardy. Don't say that too often, but there was a very small part of me that always gets worried with things like that, because it's nothing against the creative team. That's my thing. Sony, this is still a Sony film, and that's what I always get worried by, is what Sony are capable of doing, which they have done to almost every film once it's got too popular for their own good. And we don't get that. Then we get the Lego dimension, which I thought was hilarious. We got the old clips of J.K. Simmons. They're using old audio from the other films, but just having that Lego Peter Parker talking to Miguel O'Hara, and he's like, "You're our best one," and it's so funny. And it did make me think. I was like, "Yeah, it's like, it does make sense that Sony did do the Lego films. They have those rights somewhere." But to me, that isn't like a haha. We've got the Lego rights. It wasn't like Chris Pratt popped up. It was, yes, it's the Lego Daily Bugle. Yes, you can buy it for £300 as a set. But it didn't feel like an advert. It felt like they want to do this, and they're picking another universe to do it in. And I'm glad they just didn't sit there and have him go through like 20 dimensions in a minute as well. Sticking to 2 or 3, just about right. We're seeing that again, the different animation approach to each multiverse, and what he's capable of as a villain, and what he knows his plans could be as a villain. And I think if they don't get that right, they're in, you know, the film won't function, but they've got everything they needed to get right to do it. And kind of in line, you know, with the Spot's powers growing, I guess we'll talk about Gwen coming back into the fold. Miles has been very lonely without his crew. Understandable. It's been obviously well over a year at this point since any of them have seen it. I think it's a year and 4 months since the first film. I think the timeline is. But what are your guys' thoughts on how they brought Gwen into his world, that actually she's on a mission? Again, that second viewing, you're starting to notice a lot more of the stuff in the background around why they can't deal with him, why they can't see him. Again, for me, this film is flawless, so I'm just going to praise it. But they handle that very delicately, that when they're having that conversation upside down on the tower, the visuals there, I think was, you know, the first one, everyone uses the shot of him going upside down across the tower. I think that's going to be the moment of those two on the tower together that everyone's going to be sharing over the next few years.
100%. Sorry, very quickly, just coming in with RJ. Can't wait to see what they do in the third film. Like seeing a villain going from not being taken seriously to then becoming menacing as the movie progresses. We'll go to his second comment a little bit later on when we get to that point in the plot as well. No, exactly. I was going to say that straight away. I've already found a because of course the movie's out in cinemas, but immediately people have good like high quality screenshots of of scenes and stuff like that, and that is one of the scenes that I've already seen online. Then sat underneath the I'm not sure what building it is in Brooklyn, but sat underneath there looking over the cityscape, whether it's that one or the one where their hands are getting close to touching, either or that's going to be screensavers, desktop backgrounds, whatever. That's going to be just plastered absolutely everywhere up until the next film comes out. And it's once again, first of all, stunning scene visually, what they just know what they're doing, the kind of the direction team. I would love to see the storyboarding for this. I really would. I'd love to have just been a fly on the wall in the meetings for them trying to kind of compose these shots together and kind of picking out the various different art styles that be used and kind of the blends and just how they would frame it and everything. But no, the introduction of Gwen back in, we kind of see at the end of Into the Spider-Verse, I guess, her coming in and saying, hey, you got a minute? But I don't know if that's been rewritten, I guess, or not, the context behind it, because we don't really have any kind of timeline based around the ending of that first film and where we're dropped into this film, whether that is meant to be the same time. I'm assuming it is. I'm guessing you guys are in the same kind of vein with that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those sort of creative things where it doesn't not mean anything, but down the line, it can work into their favor when they need it to.
Yeah, that's fair. But anyway, the conversation on the rooftop and them just kind of getting to know each other again, it not only shows kind of how far they've both come as spider people, them kind of having a game of like horse with the different Spider-Man kind of like moves and stuff like that, like threading the needle and everything like that. It's great to see kind of how far Miles has come along, because we actually get to see him doing a bit of Spider-Manning, and Gwen as well, kind of going around the city, and it's just great to see them both on screen once again. And then the conversation begins, and it gets very personal very quickly. They're talking about, how the different canon events almost can happen and stuff like that. And she mentions, in every universe, Gwen falls for Spider-Man, and she says, but not always. And it's just like the little kind of dagger, and it's just like, oh, it's definitely going to happen in the next film, but not in this film, not just yet. Leave people on the edge of their seats in that category, in that department. But that's just kind of laying the breadcrumbs down for exactly what we get for the rest of the film. It's certain things can happen in certain universes, certain things have to happen. And it's kind of leading on to kind of, is it kind of fate? Is it destiny? Is it free will? Do we have a choice over this? So many different philosophical debates you can have over the various different kind of morals that are posed in this, especially with the various different paradoxes that can be created if things go wrong and the Spider-Verse collapses. But no, it's great groundwork once again for the scene. It also kind of puts in the whole Gwen's stalking spot kind of in the universe and reporting back, and she's not there for Miles. She's there to actually, kind of clean up his mess, shall we say, which we kind of find out later that, that's the only reason why she was there in the first place. Even though she's been told not to go there, she goes there anyway, and she makes that contact.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's like when you're watching it for the first time, you wonder, oh, why? Like she like lays down that little like spider trap thing just to keep an eye on where Spot should be, and you're like, why has she done that? What is the purpose there? And then going into the second viewing, oh, okay, she's actually looking out for Spot there. That's why she's done that. But I think it's really well done where there's a sort of, she is on the mission to stalk Spot and sort of capture him, but then she's also having that personal time with Miles, and like their relationship, it's evident that Miles has missed Gwen and Gwen has missed Miles as well. I mean, just by, if we backtrack a little bit, in her drum set where she keeps her spider outfit, there is a picture of her and Miles together.
Yeah.
And then Miles you can tell Miles has missed Gwen because he's been doodling her in his notebook and stuff like that, and like it is very evident that Miles is lonely, and he's just so excited when Gwen gets back that it's just like he feels like his old times. And yeah, that shot where their sort of like hands are nearly touching and it doesn't, and it's like it's just the tension is palpable there. And then when that character mentions that we're going to go on to in a second, there is that sort of romantic tension there, and he sort of just starts like making quips about it. It's like, yeah, you can tell there is that sort of like really close connection there.
I've seen someone point out online that Miles is kind of move away from kind of, art and more towards physics as far as what he wants to kind of study and what he wants to go do in life is because of that connection that he wants to make. And he even mentions it that, in New Jersey, they're sending people across different multiverses and different dimensions. He wants to pursue that so that he can make that connection again. That's a really interesting character point to add in that show not only that he's growing, but just to show how much he actually misses his family that he made.
And I think what I liked, even going back to that scene with the school stuff, the fact is that A in physics, isn't it, and A in art, that he's still doing both of them very well. And I mean, what year are they meant to be when it's sophomore? I know he's 15, isn't he, at this point? So it's like the last year of like high school, I guess. And it is interesting how they approach that, especially, bringing in the Gwen stuff. As you said, the photo in the drum kit, I think it's a big moment because, they knew each other for a few days, but it did feel very family orientated. In that first film, and obviously I'm not going to get to the ending of this one, but there was that sort of great moment where the camera pans back and everyone's there, and it feels proper triumphant without there actually being anything to triumph. But in line of that, I mean, talking the multiverse, what sets it in motion, and I kind of like this from the get-go, from that opening scene of Gwen, the implication with Miguel O'Hara, and I've forgotten her name, apologies, the Spider-Woman with the motorbike that's pregnant.
Something Drew.
Yeah, it's interesting that from the get-go, they don't make out, these are great people, they're going to help us. You always feel there's something else going on there, and when Gwen is with Miles, I mean, what I think, and this isn't one of them twatty cinema sins things, but it's like, if they didn't trust her, why have they given her the mission to be on this, to be in this verse? And I always feel that there's something else in play that we haven't found out yet. But I love the fact she's got this mentor figure, but they clearly disapprove of her. They disapprove of from being there from the get-go. And it's really interesting that when they do obviously take the journey, she does the speech, you can never see him again. And Miles is there, he is invisible. I was worried, like, is he not the upside down kiss, but I was worried, like, is he just going to suddenly not be invisible anymore because she's standing right next to him, she can't see him again? I do like the fact he goes after her rather than him being invited to go in with them. But segueing into Mumbattan, which, talking about some of the great creative concepts of this film, a Mumbai Manhattan with Spider-Man India, Inspector Singh, which got a bit of a laugh out of our screening on Thursday with a few people. The comedy they had, and what I would say, certainly over here in the UK, and I think this is fair to say, Ayman, you're sort of jumping in, it sounds like it's on the wrong tangent, but that whole sequence, I'd say Britain's more familiar with Indian culture than America would be. So for me watching it, there was a lot more things I recognized from our day-to-day lives or people we've known or people we've grown up with. And I thought that was a very, not funny sequence, but when they're making those very finite jokes that if you'll find it funny, they absolutely nailed it. And I've just got to say that just the concept of, again, they haven't just gone to another New York. Oh, it looks old. Oh, it looks modern. It's here's a different culture in the same environment. Here's the Golden Gate Bridge, and here's everyone else around it and what's going to be involved. And I just thought that sequence is when they're onto something with this film. They changed the frame rate, they changed the colors. It's the first time we get Gwen stuff, which is great, but it feels like the first time we're seeing this. And then of course we're getting the Spot in his own frame rate, in his own animation technique, trying to figure things out. I thought the whole Mumbat and stuff is where we knew instantly that, again, they've nailed the multiverse concept. And Spider-Man India, again, a character I know nothing about, I thought he was hilarious. Great character to bring in, great character to introduce. We know there's going to be so many Peter Parker variants, of course. This is a film, of course, there are trailers, there's hundreds of Spider-Man. But to get a bit of development with not another, Peter Parker that's American and from New York that we've had in the first film, that we've had in live action 3 times, and to have someone of a different culture for it, I thought was amazing. And I think there was a lot of laughs with it in a really good way. Not that could sound terrible if that sounded wrong.
No, exactly. Pavitra Prabhakar, it's just a great character name to start off with, being able to, come in with that. It was so nice to once again see another culture being kind of, explored and represented in the same light as, it's in a superhero film, it's in a Spider-Man film. We have this character that, people can, connect with, on a different level, in the same way that, we get Spider-Punk in this film with Herbie Brown. Anyone who's been to Camden ever will immediately go, oh yeah, straight away, that's that culture. And it's done really, really well. It's voice acted very well as well. I always remember, I know it was in the trailer, I saw a trailer for it with the chai tea moment. But the naan bread thing as well got me as well, because I'm one to call it naan bread. And it is just, you just call it naan. And yeah, it's just the humor in those scenes are fantastic. But also, once again, the frame rates, the visualization, the art style, everything involved in the sequence, the blending of the different images, it's just on every single level, this film worked. And, the more I talk about it, the more I fall in love with it. And it's just kind of pushing me on to, see it again as soon as possible, as soon as I can.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, Indian Spider-Man, it's just the little things that he does that are just like, the little quips that he has is just so brilliant. Like when he's pointing out the different landmarks, like, here's the traffic, here's the traffic, here's the traffic. And like when he's like explaining to Miles, like, chai tea, he's like, I love chai tea. Like, well, wouldn't it be weird if I called it coffee? It's like with cream. It's just one of those, it's just like so really well done. And yeah, again, with the sort of, he's got a different animation style to Miles, to Gwen. It's just so really well done. And like the sequence where after when they're trying to save the people, and like again, like Gwen holds Miles back because that is a canon event, and the fact that Miles is thinking, and on the first watch you're thinking, oh yeah, Gwen's doing it out of sort of to be careful for Miles, and it's not because Inspector Singh has to die. It's because you're thinking, oh, it's going to be too dangerous for Miles, he'll get hurt. Gwen actually likes him like that, but it's not, and it's just like one of those. It's really well done. And then in Mumbattan, just to talk on Spider-Punk and Daniel Kaluuya, I mean, I think I read somewhere that it took, just for the scenes that he's in, it took about 27 weeks just to animate Spider-Punk. And that's just so... And I didn't realize it was Daniel Kaluuya until I read the cast list. Because normally he does a really good American accent, but this is his actual accent, and he's talking like, and it's just, really well done. I love that whole sequence in Mumbattan, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a great sequence for it, and I think the timing of it's right. That it's not that it's. I mean, it's not low stake at all. It's not low key, but I don't think you could go into that verse, have that injection of humor, bring in someone like Spider-Man India for the first time at the end of the film. It kind of made sense that this is going to be the first portal we go to, and also the whole concept of the canon event. I loved. I know we'll get into it properly shortly when they do the backstory, but as you said, Ayman, on that second viewing, it teases it. We see it flash up on Gwen Stacy's watch. We see her knowing what the consequences are. The other people talking about it before, and kind of knowing that, I mean, yeah, we'll get into the canon bit. I was going to talk about the whole Spider-Man joke thing of the Uncle Ben's and stuff, but that's Hobie Brown and of course, Spider-Man Punk. I knew people that read the comics and were really hyping it before it came out. I don't think he's British in the comics. The one thing I'll give him the credit for is to get a British actor voicing him. Like, yes, I know Daniel Kaluuya is like quite a big name now in terms of acting career. You know, Oscar winner, narrating Arsenal documentaries as well. Proper Londoner. It was so much better that it was that it wasn't a famous Londoner doing it for the sake of being a Londoner, that it wasn't an American doing a British, voice. It just felt authentic, and the whole 70s Sex Pistols punk vibe. I was sat there thinking, is this going to work with the Americans? Yes, it clearly did. And on the rewatch again today, his mannerisms are still very funny. The little moments with him are still great. And really, when you get to that ending again of setting up the new team, he's there from the get-go. And there's a really, really good line of dialogue. And I can't remember it word for word, but I noticed it in the second screening today. Before he even goes to New York with the others, he makes a comment to Miles and basically says, don't join up with these until you know what you're getting yourself into. And it's played very quickly for laughs. But really, that's his character from the get-go, knowing he's clearly looking for a way out. He clearly doesn't agree with it all. And the whole film, I think, is him building up to getting out of them, which he absolutely nails. And again, they're bringing in so many new characters, but all these new characters are getting character development. They've all got story arcs. They've all got a place. They've all got a purpose for the story. And I like the fact that Hobie's such an outlandish choice to be there, that it works. And full credit for getting Daniel Kaluuya. And it's one of those roles where I can't imagine anyone else doing it. And I know it's been out a couple of days, but straight away I can't picture them getting someone. And he is cool, and he kind of says it. I've been this cool. I've been this cool from the moment you saw me. And you ain't doing that if you ain't got an actor with a bit of charisma playing him. But what are your thoughts? I guess before we move into the Spider HQ stuff, do you have anything else to say on Hobie Brown or Spider-Man India?
Yeah, just very quickly on Hobie Brown, just kind of backing off that, and we'll talk about it a little bit more when we get into kind of the Spider HQ and the canon events. He is the first person to be on Miles' side in this. Even when we get down to kind of the revelations and everything like that, Gwen's kind of in the same boat of like, yeah, it needs to happen. Everyone's in the same boat of, yeah, it needs to happen. And Spider-Punk's just straight up like, nah, it doesn't. And he's the one who tells him to, go for the whole hand. So he's immediately on his side. He wants anarchy. I think he likes the idea of Miles in the first place because Miles, as we find out later on in the film, is pure anarchy. He's the whole reason for the mess in the first place. So that's why he's very happy for him to be kind of siding up with him, because he understands that even though he doesn't want to be an anarchist, he kind of is by just existing in the first place. Yeah. And he's very happy to be on board with that. So that's something that I just kind of picked up on the first run, and I'm just looking for more stuff that I can pick up on the second.
Yeah, I think, with Daniel Kaluuya and Spider-Punk, it's just like, it's like when Miles is sort of drawing the power from the shield and Obi makes his entrance and like he goes to Miles, next time use the palm. It's like, he is intelligent as well, but he doesn't conform, which is the basis of his whole character. He doesn't conform to how life and the canon events should be. And the fact that Miles says to him, like, how are you cooler with your mask off? It's just those little things. And one thing that I picked up on the second viewing is when he's like taking stuff off the wall and sort of picking stuff up when they're walking through the HQ. It turns out he's making a watch.
The watch.
The watch, so that Gwen can sort of like jump back because he has that sort of thought that this is how it's going to go down. And then when anarchy like ensues, basically, he's like, yeah, I quit anyway, and just nopes out of it. Because he knows that what Miguel O'Hara and the whole Spider HQ thing isn't right. So he's on Miles' side for the majority of it, or all of it, pretty much.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important thing as well, that, when you get to the big revelation with Captain Stacy, hey, this guy dropped this off for you. I just started thinking on the first one, how did he make a watch? But I'm not going to question that. But you see it on that second viewing, and like that first one, you're just going to pick up. I bet you could watch this 10 times. On that 10th viewing, you're going to notice new things. And it feels like one of those kinds of films where every single frame is not like it's like every shot of paintings that Twitter account. They could just do this for the entire film of this, because there's going to be so many little things that are noticed, that are picked up on, and no doubt when this drops on digital, there'll be one of those like explanation videos, like here's every single Spider-Man that was ever in this film.
It'll be like, here are all the Easter eggs, and it's literally just longer than the actual film.
Exactly. And I think Hobie Brown's one of those where they got it bang on, bringing him in, served his purpose, and you know, everyone watch this is going to want more from him, which we're going to get in that sequel, in that part 3. But kind of following, let's talk Spider HQ. Now, I will sort of say this on paper. This was all over the marketing. You know, you got that amazing first poster where it's like the hundreds of Spider-Men across it, which I think is actually one of the best posters of the year, if I'm being completely honest. The more I've seen that, the more I kind of want to pick it up.
Is that the one with Miles in the middle?
Yeah, and he's upside down on the thing.
So I'm just going to very quickly come in with this one because I've seen this online today, and someone.
Oh, if it's the left and the right thing, you can ignore that, because whoever's done it just cropped it.
That's a shame. That is a shame.
Yeah, I know, because there's like the 3 prevalent ones on either side of him end up being good and bad. But yeah, whoever did it just cropped it. Spider HQ. I don't have much to say, because again, it's not just cameos. It serves its purpose. I'm glad that not every Spider-Man looks the same, but people are going to want to talk about, I guess, a couple of big things before we even get to Miguel. I'm just going to chime in first. Didn't expect the Donald Glover Prowler cameo. Absolutely love the Donald Glover Prowler cameo. But more importantly, and I'm not teasing anything for Beyond the Spider-Verse next year, it looks like they got a blend of live action with animated done very well. Very well to the point it worked. And if they wanted to do that next year with 3 other actors, be my guest. And I think people will probably think that it's going to happen. But again, it's one of those things, right? Every frame's going to mean something to somebody else, somebody that clocks a comic they read when they're younger, a favorite Spider-Man, a favorite this, a favorite that. Even the Insomniac Spider-Man coming into it from the game, we kind of knew he was going to be in it. I think they'd put him in a couple of put him in the trailers somewhere, and people had clocked it. And a great thing earlier on is Miles, his roommate, aside from the fact we've got a Sun Heung-min poster up, he's playing the PlayStation game in the universe, which is really cool. And they've even designed it and animated it to look like it should be played in their universe. But just what are your thoughts on Mr. Miguel? To me, I thought it worked. And again, it's that question of how far can a multiverse take things? They can take it pretty far, having the Western Spider-Man, the Spider-Man on the horse, so many different things that it all serves a purpose, and it builds up this multiverse that, yes, there are thousands and thousands of them, and I believe that there could be thousands of them.
Just for the joke of Peter Parked car, just for that joke alone, I don't even know if that's an actual character that's ever appeared in a comic. Or do we know that? Or
I'm pretty sure that is. I'd have to check it.
No way.
I think that. Well, I mean, I think it is. It's used very briefly. It doesn't get to a comic run, but it's like it is one of those that is sort of there.
Unreal. But no, Spider Society was it was plastered all over the trailers. It was plastered all over the posters. It kind of looked like the main conflict in the trailers as well, which is quite interesting because, you know, I didn't think that the trailer spoiled too much about the plot of the film or anything like that, but we knew that there would be a conflict between, you know, Miles and the entirety of Spider Society, and he'd have to be kind of chased out of there. Whilst watching the film, I was wondering if it was because he'd stolen one of the watches and he was trying to calibrate it to get to somewhere, or if he'd done something wrong or something like that. But the fact that it was because they wanted to stop him from kind of, you know, ending his canon event and collapsing the Spider-Verse as a whole, it's really fascinating. It sets up an interesting premise because we completely understand why they're putting in these precautions.
Yeah.
Because they don't want the universe to collapse. And it seems like for Miguel O'Hara, it's been his almost kind of his second lifelong mission after trying to have a family. And to have this one person almost bring it all down, there's going to be a lot of resentment there. And the fact that he's already got kind of the trust of all the people around him, there's only a select few who have actually interacted with Miles and actually given Miles a chance, who are willing to, you know, help him out and help him on his way. It's really, really interesting. It's a massive conflict, and it just sets up that, you know, any of those people we've seen so far in Spider Society can come back in the next film and could fall onto either side. You could end up with a proper Civil War situation with just the Spider-Verse, with, you know, a 50-50 split of people who believe that Miles can, you know, live his life and, you know, doesn't have to be a canon event. Canon events don't need to happen for everyone, or the people who are like, no, this needs to happen, otherwise the universe will explode, kind of. So it's setting up a major conflict for it, and you know, the introduction was great for it. The visualization for it is great. Even though it was in the trailer as well, the kind of like go catch Spider-Man and everyone pointing at each other meme that lands, you know, every time. That got the biggest laugh out of my cinema. So no, I really liked the sequence. I really loved how they also introduced the whole canon events thing with the visualization as well, showing those live action segments as well of the various different Spider-Men, integrating all the different stories they've had previously into that, as they've been doing throughout the film up to that point, and really putting the point home of, you know, this is the big conflict. His dad is going to die, and he has to make that choice on whether he wants to save everything or one person. And that's a big conflict for Spider-Man. That's a massive conflict for Spider-Man to deal with.
Yeah, I think with Spider HQ, I mean, Spider-Man 2099 is my favorite Spider-Man, just design-wise. He's just so unique. And the fact that he is, like, you see the different Spider-Man, like Ben Reilly, he gets a prominent shout-out in that, when his original comic book run was bad and just received badly. But the fact that they made him work in this, and I mean, Spider-Man 2099, and like when the platform's coming down and like Miles turns to Gwen and Gwen knows what he's going to say. It's like, yeah, but stop, don't say anything, it's his thing, and stuff like that. And like, yeah, I think them explaining the canon events and the visualization that they gave him is just so really well done, because you get those other, again, Easter eggs. Like going back to what you said, George, about read one thing where this film has the most replay value, because in every rewatch you will notice something different. And like when they showed that little clip of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man and Uncle Ben dying, when they showed Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man and Uncle Ben dying there, and yeah, confirming that Childish Gambino is the Prowler, because there were those thoughts in the first one where he has that throwaway line that, oh yeah, I have a nephew that grew up in Brooklyn or that lives in Brooklyn, and it's like, oh yeah, he is a Prowler, but is he or is he not? And then showing him as the Prowler. But yeah, the whole Spider HQ bit was my favorite. And again, like Tate said, like the bit where they're pointing at each other, it's just that meme. It's just that got the biggest laugh out of my cinema both times, because everybody knows that joke, but you didn't think that they'd actually do it. But yeah, it's there.
It's the way they build off the joke, though, when that other Spider-Man just walks through and they all think it's him, just for that brief moment. And obviously he's on the back of him. It's just, again, it's that comedy played for perfection, and kind of talking the canon events. I mean, when that scene started, I was like, oh yeah, you're just going to explain how multiverse works. We've seen that quite recently in a lot of Marvel films. And then it was what the big thing that they got out of me. The first thing we see, it's the multiverse MCU thing with it's almost like the tree branch where it's white and the branching, and they eradicate that and put the Spider-Verse web up. Now, I'm not reading this as a haha F the MCU. I think it's a very polite, hey, you know, technically they're in the same universe, and if there are some audience members that are familiar with that MCU version of a multiverse, they'll understand what's going to happen now. It means nothing to anyone, but it's just those little nods. At least they're respectful of you know, what has come before, what's going to continue to come with, you know, the whole multiverse saga they're calling it. But I loved the concept design of it all being webs, that it was very much for spider people. And you got the great joke, you know, where he does call it the Spider-Verse, and he sort of dismisses it and calls it the arachnoids, the arachnoid multiverses.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect it to go all in that way. I didn't think they'd do not just the Uncle Ben's, because we take the clocks back to when The Amazing Spider-Man came out, the first one back in 2012. you know, it's like, oh, they're going to kill Uncle Ben again, great. And then, you know, that goes with the second film, and then we're doing Spider-Man again, and it was like brilliant, three times in 10 years. And this is, but we're not going to do the origin because everyone knows the origin of Spider-Man now. And I've got to hand it to them. This whole sequence felt like not a nod of the head that, yes, we know you will know. But there will be audience members at home who are watching this that are tired of reboots, that are tired of the same origins happening here, there, everywhere. What to me this scene did, it enabled them to make it more accessible with the concept of the multiverse. And I fundamentally believe that the first two Spider-Verse films have done more for multiverse film language, for showing people what it means than the last like 3 years of Marvel. And there's been a lot of it in this 3 years of Marvel. And they're not taking the audience as idiots. They're just saying, hey, we know Uncle Ben died, but this is why it's happened hundreds of times. And we'll show you one or two of the Uncle Ben scenes you will all remember. But then bringing in the Captain Stacy stuff, I love because, they'd mentioned earlier in the film that, with the whole party sequence that Captain Morales is getting a promotion in next week. And it's only until Miles in that room is like, my dad's going to be made captain.
In 2 days. Yeah.
And you're thinking, shit, like this is where the stakes are coming from. Then you're also thinking Gwen's dad is already Captain Stacy and he's alive at this point. And God knows what she's thinking when she joined this group and found out at some point she'll have to watch her dad die to be a canon event. And I love that everyone's reaction, bringing back Peter B. Parker, who's got his kid as well, Obi watching carefully in the background. They did a really good job at building up Miguel as I guess the villain, right? And the sad thing is that like the best villains, I'm not talking Thanos and wiping out humanity, blah blah blah, but the best villains to me tend to have reasoning. If you can understand, I mean, we're saying this Guardians 3 just had an amazing villain who is just terrible, but in the sense of a compelling villain, someone that you understand why they have become the way they have, and Miguel's backstory is bang on perfect to understand why he's now put his life into making sure these never happen, because the canon event cost him his world, but the whole point is it doesn't mean it's because he lost his world everyone else should have the same consequence, everyone else should sit through the same thing. It's not that at all, and that's why that canon event seems so important. Even going back to New Way Home, I know I do slag it off a fair amount these days, but there's the great scene of the Peter Parkers coming together to talk about Uncle Ben and what had happened, and someone I think has already edited the soundtrack from this film onto that scene, and it sounds a lot better immediately because it's that story that it's bringing these events that have happened to all these Spider-Men, to these characters, and it does have a lasting effect. And that when I got to this point of the rewatch again today, I was really enjoying trying to look at the other things, kind of spotting if Easter eggs, who else is going to pop up here and there, and it's a great way to then set up that finale of Miguel O'Hara is going to cross the line. He's going to basically keep him hostage till his dad dies, which is pretty sick when you really think about it, that he's willing to do that to someone. And it's that point you're going to start to see the splits. The certain people are going to put their allegiance to Miles. The others are going to put their allegiance to Miguel. And it's a really great way to set up this is, to me, I know that the next film's a part 2, right? This feels like a part 2 of a 3-part story. I know it's a trilogy, but this genuinely, it couldn't flow better as what will be a triple bill next year. It doesn't feel like, here's a random sequel. I will always want to watch the first one before it because it's tied in so well. And I like that is where the end goal of this is that you are there to question allegiances, to question the morals of these people picking him. And, I won't jump too far with what happens to Gwen and her father at the end of this film, but certainly the canon event scene does enough to warrant the great chase that happens to really kickstart this darker ending to this film, which hasn't had it at this point. Spider-Man films haven't really had, not an Empire Strikes Back, but, they've always, they're not cliffhangers. You've always been able to watch them individually. And they absolutely nailed it. And without this canon event scene working, if you didn't believe Miguel, you're not going to be able to function the rest of the film. But if you do, then you're in. I know that's a bit of a load of just waffled there, but
no,
that make sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. Like you were saying about the various different canon events, could we make the argument that because they've now explained all of these canon events, we can now have more origin stories in the future of various different Spider-Men when it comes up, and they'll be just okay with it because they've laid the groundwork now. Like, we can see repeated story beats because we know that's going to be part of that, and this film just enhances every other film because of it. That's the sign of a very good film. That's a sign of a team that knows how to connect the universe and spin its own web across the various different films that have come from past. My immediate first thought when he was talking about the canon events and the death of Captain Stacy, though, was, okay, so Gwen's dad is meant to save a child in rubble and then die. And all I was thinking was, the last time we saw Gwen's dad was in a pile of rubble. There were kids present there. And I was thinking whether that was an interrupted canon event, possibly. And we do find out kind of later on that, yeah, it kind of was. It kind of was an interrupted canon event, whether it was interrupted by the Vulture, or whether, you know, Miguel's actions of putting him in that chamber and, you know, getting involved and intervening. If he wasn't there, if, you know, they didn't have that interaction, would he have died in that building in the rubble? Would that have been the canon event? Would that have started the story? Instead, towards the end of the film, we get him quitting, because that's the consequence of that. He doesn't die in that rubble. He doesn't die in that opening sequence, and therefore the canon event is avoided. So
I don't think it's a canon event purely just because the event comes from Vulture being in their world.
Yeah.
But I see the logic to it, and it makes it interesting. I think what happens, without jumping too fast in, the moment he says he quits and she knows that her dad's now going to live,
yeah,
I think that's when she realizes you can
Avoid
disrupt
them.
a canon event.
Yeah.
That, you know, as I said, and some's not going to work for a girl. Some might need to work for others. You know, I'm sure stopping an Uncle Ben would, you know, wipe everything. Earth 42, when we get to that, you know, that is a disrupted canon, not just an event. That's everything. But it does make it interesting, that perspective as well, with Captain Stacy, and, you know, going back to Inspector Singh, setting that up when we first get the black and white vision. We see Inspector Singh in sync with Captain Morales and all these different Stacys running in the same, and it's so well animated that they've been able to cut between the three of them. But it's such a great way to explain the premise of that. And it also then makes further sense of why Spider-Man India is immediately with them. That, yeah, he's like them, but he knows now that his, you know, potential father-in-law is alive because he's disrupted this event. And it seems to have worked out okay for his dimension at present. So it's a really interesting thing they're setting up. And I think it gives them flexibility in the future. I mean, I don't want to sit here and say we need 100 Spider-Man films, but it certainly, as a character, and what I'd imagine what the comics are going to do moving forward, I'm sure this film is now going to be this big junction in the future of how they approach Spider-Man in all forms of media.
Exactly. I just want to add to that kind of previous point as well, once again, with the color palettes and the cinematography of the scenes of not just the Spider Society, but also the reconciliation between Gwen and her father, and that whole scene and everything like that leads on to kind of, you know, after the chase, you know, everyone going in, she has to go and try and find out whether that canon event is still happening or not. And that reconciliation scene is beautiful. It's really good. The music nails itself there. And, you know, that's when Gwen decides, okay, let's try and form a team here. Let's go and stop this from happening.
And when he hugs her as well, just the colors change.
Exactly.
First time she has sort of peace, isn't it? And they reflect it in what's happening. And it's a pretty powerful scene as well. And again, I say, I mean, I wasn't crying or anything, but it's not like Up, but there's this certain, and I mean, I've probably fell victim to this sort of certain snobbery around animated films, where some people think that once you're like over the age of 10, you don't ever need to watch animated film again. And I'm not saying it's me. I've been like it a bit in the past, but, you know, I've got relatives that have said that, and they'll be quite honest and just saying that they just struggle with animation, which I've always understood. I think if you were to ever show someone this film, and the problem is selling this film, the toughest thing for people like that, the toughest thing about selling it is that it's a Spider-Man film, because they'll say, hey, but we've seen so many Spider-Man films now. And, you know, and I think what this certainly this opening weekend box office has done, it's showing the audiences there. And I do think, I mean, not to jump too far in, but this is already one best animated film. So we can end that discussion for the Oscars next year. But the Oscar ceremony is 2 weeks before Part 3 drops. There's not going to be a better bit of marketing for that third film than this film doing well during award season. And hopefully that is going to get people to look into a film like this that might not before. And again, the animation example set by this is just outstanding in so many different variations of it. Do we want to talk Earth 42 heading into the ending?
Yeah, so this was a very good twist. I wasn't expecting this. We're introduced to the machine that sends people home back to their original universes, and of course, you know, Miles gets scanned in. You're kind of expecting, okay, he can get home, he can maybe stop the event, and we'll see him kind of setting himself up and getting ready to kind of protect himself from, you know, all the different multiverses coming to get him basically and stop him from saving his own dad. But no, instead it's thrown completely out of whack when, you know, we see that parallel of, you know, him in his bedroom and Gwen in his bedroom, and it's like, oh, they're not in the same universe. Okay, Gwen's gone to his universe, hasn't been able to find him, has that really nice interaction with the parents there, and, you know, sets the groundwork for, I'm going to find him, I'm going to kind of bring him home, I'm going to make sure he's okay. Whereas Miles has his big moment of, you know, having had what I can only assume is like, it's kind of framed as like the longest night. Like he's been battered, he's been bruised, he's been ripped to shreds. He's stumbling in, he's on the verge of tears. He made it home. He didn't, you know, didn't get taken out on the way there, only to find out that, you know, he reveals to his mum that he's Spider-Man and she doesn't know what he's talking about. She has no idea. Everything's slightly off. You know, Uncle Aaron's back. It's just like, it's such a kind of great twist to kind of have towards the end of the film. Yeah. And then on top of that, him getting knocked out by the Prowler, we assume that, you know, Uncle Aaron's going to kind of reveal something to him about, oh yeah, this is the universe like where, you know, yeah, everything went kind of tits up, you know, there is no Spider-Man. But no, instead we get Miles as the Prowler from Earth 42, which is absolutely fascinating. And another thing, I'm not sure if this has been, you guys come across this online as well, but in Into the Spider-Verse, the first one, and this could be kind of a key link to this film in itself, but when he first has that interaction with Spider-Man, and they have that, oh, you're me too, interaction towards the start of the film, the colors light up with the Prowler, and also the music plays a beat from the Prowler's theme. So was Miles always meant to be the Prowler in this canon? Was that always his destiny? Was he always going to take up the reins from his Uncle Aaron until, you know, the Spider from 42 came around and, you know, messed things up?
It's a good question. Sorry, McGee.
I think with the Earth 42, I think again it's another reason why a second watch is so worth doing, because when you're introduced to the machine that's sending the anomalies back, it's picking up on their DNA from their original universe. Then it's revealed that the spider that bit Miles isn't actually from his universe, it's from Universe 42. So that machine that he got sent back with sent him back to, picked up on his spider DNA and was like, oh, okay, your DNA is from here, you need to go here. And then it's like the fact that Miguel, Spider-Woman, and Ben Reilly didn't pick up, and Gwen didn't pick up on that fact, and they go back to his universe. It's just so interesting. And the fact that, yeah, I mean, Miles as the Prowler is just, he looks like that universe. It just shows you how badly it can go wrong if there is no Spider-Man in that universe. Because they talk about, I think, George, you were going to mention the Sinister Six cartel. Yeah. Everything's on fire. The Prowler is there, and like Miles is the Prowler, and he looks different because everything has gone so wrong. He looks aged because of what we imagine his life has been like. His life has been, instead of fighting crime, he is the criminal. He is the sort of supervillain, essentially. And I think, just going back to RJ's comment, I think that's the reason why he looks so different. It's because he has aged, basically, because of what he's been doing.
Yeah, the Earth 42 stuff, I absolutely love. I mean, not that I'm one of those arrogant dickheads, but Eamon, the moment he landed, I did whisper to you on Thursdays, and straight away I says, that's not his normal home.
Yeah,
And
there's no universe.
there was just something off about the animation from that get-go. But I loved and loved and loved it because they didn't just do this big bravado moment. They build up to that revelation for about 5-10 minutes. Miles having all the visions in his head, what people have been saying to him, the New York being different with his mind playing games. Then in sequence, you've got Gwen, getting her people together. It was a really smart way to end it. And the first time, I didn't think they sort of made out longer, but they could have ended that film about 10 minutes earlier and you'd have still had a similar impact. But that 10 minutes they give with us once we know about the twists is so exciting and it's so interesting because, as you said, Earth 42, they never had their Peter Parker. They never had anyone bitten by the Spider-Man. It'd all gone wrong. And that's the space of 1 year and 4 months as well. Everything's wrong. And, Captain Morales has died at this point. They've swapped the rest in power sign with him and Uncle Aaron. When they were building up to the door opening, I did think it would be Miles. And I was like, oh my God, he's going to be Miles in front of the other Miles. And I was so curious. And I just didn't expect Uncle Aaron. I mean, I'm a massive fan of Mahershala Ali. I think he's an incredible actor. And I still recommend anyone that hasn't. I know he's won 2 Oscars already, but True Detective Season 3, playing the same character in 3 different parts of his life. One of the best TV performances I've ever seen from an actor in a miniseries. Absolutely love him. And he brought so much charisma to Uncle Aaron in such a short amount of time. I love that we get him back because that was the one thing leading into this week. I was like, it is a bit gutted. We're not gonna get to see him back as the Prowler or anything. But I love the twist that he isn't the Prowler. Miles is in what I'd imagine, I'm very curious about how much time we'll get in Earth 42 at the next film. But as you said, everything has gone wrong for Miles. Like his dad was killed. There was no Spider-Man. He's turned to the life of crime. His mom working those extra shifts because there's no money in the house. The uncle, probably Miles' money as well as the uncle's to help bail her out. It's so amazing that everything went so wrong for him. And even to the point where, I guess new Miles has worked out, so your dad's still alive, but why would I let you go back to him? I love the fact that, yes, he's in peril. He's in chains. He's obviously charging his electric battery to get out of it at the start of the next film. But it leaves us in a really exciting place that, the next film is called Beyond the Spider-Verse. He isn't beyond it. He's sort of stuck in it. But it makes it exciting still that he's very much capable of getting out of that issue, but he needs to get out of that world, not the issue. And how do you counterbalance your character stuck in peril? You've got the villains in his current world ensuring that his dad's going to die. We have the Spot, coming back into motion right at the end, just when you might have forgot about him. And then to have Gwen, assembling the spider teams together. I'm just I've seen the film twice. It's been out, 3 days. So it's tricky, but it might be one of my favorite ever endings to a film. And I've always been a sucker for the cliffhanger endings. And I mean, Tate, you'll remember this. Obviously, lived Infinity War. It was never a cliffhanger ending for me because it's such an iconic story. We all knew the Infinity Gauntlet, they'd lose half. And the day we watched that film, when everyone saw it, the OG Avengers were left and everyone on the 5-picture deals are the ones that had disappeared. And at no point did I ever think the characters were in true peril. It worked, and I love the film. I still love the film. But this was one of the first times where I felt like these characters are now in peril. How are they going to get saved? And the comparison I keep making to Empire is that when you talk to people of a certain age, a certain demographic, they always talk about that wait from episode 5 to episode 6. That none of them knew how would they save Han Solo? Is it his father? We don't have as many questions. We don't certainly have a 3-year wait, thank God. We've got a 9-month wait at present. And I just thought it's such an amazing way to end the film, to build up this climax, this 2-parter. And the key thing is that it felt earned, like they'd earned the part 3. They'd earned that ending of everything going wrong because every single thing has been set up across the first 2 hours of you watching this film. And it's kind of, I'll bring up a couple of comments, but obviously what Dave mentioned earlier, his son was upset because he couldn't watch the final part. Can you imagine, like, being young and not knowing film things, that the weight and stuff that is not resolved.
I was going to say, it's not this original story as well, so it's not like you can refer back to the comics to be able to find out. It's not like you can kind of go onto forums. All you've got is speculation. All you've got is speculation off that cliffhanger, and all the pieces are in play. We have all the evidence, I'm sure, that we can get to be able to figure it out. And I'm sure they're going to introduce loads and loads of new Spider people across many different Spider-Verses to join into the next film to make up a mega team. Whether, once again, my prediction of Team Spider-Man 2099 to, you know, Team Spider-Gwen, and which side do you fall on? And then are they all going to team up to face against the Spot, or is the Spot just going to be focused purely on Miles? What's the deal with that? We got Miles in the wrong universe as well. There's so many different elements at play here. And the fact that this was kind of the one where they lose, it is just like Empire in that way. They do not win this film.
Yeah.
Everyone's in a state of peril. They do have good emotional beats, and people are able to emotionally kind of like Gwen's story emotionally from her family perspective. I believe that is cleared now. I don't think there's going to be anything else added to that in the next film. I think if there's going to be any emotional beats from Gwen, it's going to be her relationship directly to Miles. And I think the focus of the final film will be that focus back onto Miles as the lead character, with Gwen in a supporting role, kind of coming in and aiding and assisting where she can, as they try and kind of put everything back together. And maybe it's going to be a bittersweet ending. Maybe they'll never see each other again, or maybe it'll be kind of a nice happy ending where they do kind of get to have their life and get to kind of interact and be able to hop between beyond the Spider-Verse.
Ayman?
Yeah, I think with the ending, I mean, the final shot is Gwen has assembled all the Spider-Men from the previous film, and then we've got some new ones like Spider-Punk. I think out of that whole team, I think the one I'm looking forward to seeing again the most is Nicolas Cage as Spider-Noir. It's just I mean, but that whole ending, like the fact that Miles is a Prowler, I'm a little bit curious about how they're gonna fit in so much, because they're gonna have to fit in the fact that Miles has to escape from the Prowler. Are they gonna expand on that, or are they just gonna drop that and have him escape with Gwen and then just leave that on its own? I think that might not do that universe justice. I think we need to see a little bit more of that. But then, how long is the film going to be? Because this one was 2 hours and 20, but it didn't feel like that. And then you've got films that are like 3 hours, like Avatar was like 3 hours, Avatar 2. I think you could make the case of making the next one longer and doing justice for both Spot, because he is going to be the main villain. You have to finish that. But then you can't just drop the Prowler, because you've set that up so well. Why would you then invest that time and then just drop it? So they do like a 50-50 split, or 70-25. I think that might be perfect. And my main curiosity is, how are they going to finish the Prowler storyline? Is it going to be a redemption arc for Miles in that? Is he going to realize, oh, I was just dealt a bad hand in this universe. This is what I could be. And stuff like that. I mean, it's just really interesting. But yeah, I mean, the fact that it's a cliffhanger, I can understand why kids were upset that they couldn't finish the film, because it is a cliffhanger. It is not finished. But we knew that going in, because it was part 1, part 2. But yeah, 9 months is going to be a long time.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I'm kind of with you on that Earth 42 seems so well set up that I'd like to spend some time there. Like, not that I need to see the Sinister Six cartel, but we clearly need to obviously find out what happened to his dad, what's put Miles Barriers now. We need to see what else there is. And it kind of, going back to Star Wars again, it's like Return of the Jedi, right? The first 40 minutes is them resolving the Han Solo situation, then it becomes let's get back to where we were going with this. And certainly, I've got no idea about runtime. You'd imagine something similar, 2 hours, 2:20, 2:15, something like that. Again, this is one of the longest animated films ever made. I don't think it could be any longer. And you've got to deal with how do we deal with Spider-Man 2099 and the morals there. How do we then deal with the Spot with Captain Morales? There's 3 big story arcs to do in one film. And I'm curious, and I think what they've sort of earned at the very minimum from me, and I'm sure from many others, is the trust to absolutely nail that third part. That I think they've done them back to back. You're not going to set something up this well intrinsically and just dropped off for part 2, which you've written and made at the same time. So certainly, I'd like to be on Earth 42 for a bit, but I think they know what they're doing. I'd imagine it'll be getting back to Miles' universe to then kickstart the finale. But I'm also the same. Nick Cage, Spider Noir. I was really disappointed when they first announced that he went back for this one. I don't think it's anything to do with Nicolas Cage himself. I think it was for story, and it was that great moment when that new team set up. Of course, Gwen narrating it again. It starts with her, ends with her. It absolutely should. It's almost her film to a point from storytelling perspective, and I'm very excited to see what does come next. And heading into sort of my final thoughts on this film, obviously I've been glowing about this for days. I'm quite comfortable still saying this and Spider-Man 2 are the best Spider-Man films by a country mile, and I'll probably go so far as to say that this is one of, if not the best animated film I've ever seen in my life at this point. I know I don't watch as many others, but I fundamentally can't get past the variations of animation used in a 2-hour 20 film that just feels like I've never seen this before. And I think this is going to become immediately a fan favorite. People are going to grow up with this. It's the best film of this year. It will easily be right up there come the end of this year. And I have nothing negative at all to say about this. The soundtrack's perfect. The Daniel Pemberton score's perfect. Every single person involved in this film absolutely deserves all the credits coming their way. Whatever's going to come their way, whatever other projects they can do, is just a sign that, and even go back to filmmaking, things like Moana getting remade in live action after 5 years, which is a discredit to animators and things like that on these other films. These films like this, you're just not going to get replicated. And I really, really hope Sony don't drop the ball and think we'll just do this now again in live action. We can never trust Sony. But certainly with this film, flawless. I'm still in awe, and I can't wait to see it again. It's
absolutely unreal how, once again, I had very high expectations for this film, and it surpassed them. It didn't just match them, it went past them. It was so well put together on every single front. I can't think of any kind of negatives from the film. The only negative I have is that I was ready to sit in for another 2 hours and watch part 2 straight away. And that can only be really taken as a positive, because it's a film that leaves you wanting more. And I do want more. I want to see this universe played out. I want to see where these characters go. I'm fully emotionally invested, as I was in the first film. And it's an absolute perfect sequel to a fantastic opening kind of start to these films. And I'm surprised it's, in my head, done better than the first film across the board. It's one which I'm going to continue to rewatch over the years as it goes by. Hopefully the third film comes into that and I can watch all 3 as a trilogy, and it can be one of those rare occasion perfect trilogies. No negative comments at all on there. But I just want more. I just want more. And, 9 months, it's a long time, but film wise to get a sequel, that's actually really, really close. And it's just hyping me up, and I'm really excited to be able to see it when it comes out next year.
Yeah, I think throughout the whole thing, I think my favorite sequence was the chase sequence. I know we did gloss over that a little bit, but just the little bits in that chase sequence, like when the Peter Parker is saying, "I had my little girl for you, because of you," and it's just those little heartwarming little bits. And I think my favorite character out of that whole film is that Peter Parker and the baby, because the baby's just really when she's just hanging there and points out to Gwen is there, and she's when Miguel O'Hara leaves with Ben Reilly, and the baby blows raspberries after him. It's just like the little things like that. It's just they didn't need to be in there, but it's just really good like that. But yeah, I mean, I can't wait until the next one. But the standout thing for me is the chase sequence and the soundtrack. Overall, as the soundtrack is really good for me. I don't think there's going to be a song like Sunflower that was linked to the first one, but I think overall the soundtrack was really good. I mean, it's by a producer called Metro Boomin, so he's a more hip hop artist or producer. But the fact that I mean, like, I went to see it with my dad on the Friday, and my dad doesn't really enjoy rap music and hip hop. He'll listen to it, but the fact that he enjoyed the soundtrack as well just shows how well that soundtrack blends into the film so well.
Yeah, as you said, I don't think there wasn't any sort of jump out songs like the first one, but any song that's in this is integrated into the film. Yeah. And as long as it's serving that purpose, which they do, it's absolutely smashed it. And I'm very curious to see again, even music-wise, what they're doing for that third film as well. I'm sure they'll be in development now. I'm sure they'll be pushing for stuff, and it is going to be interesting. I don't want to sit here and say give us a trailer. I'm also really quickly. Last thing I'll say: no credit scene. Thank you very much. This film did not need a credit scene. Yeah. Credit scene should be there as a purpose, not for the sake of it. And I'm very happy that they did that. And if you did sit and wait for it, then at least you've got another amazing animation sequence for those credit scenes. But I think that's going to do our spoiler review for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I keep getting them mixed up because it's going to be, the next one's got Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse. First one Into the Spider-Verse. Let's be honest, it will go down to Spider-Verse trilogy, the Miles Morales trilogy. And to me, they're 2/3 of the way into the greatest comic book trilogy of all time. One more, they nail that. They've absolutely got that crown by a country mile, dethroning what I would call the Dark Knight trilogy. But let's not get into Nolan because Oppenheimer's out in 7 weeks. Everybody at home, those that have been watching today, thank you that have been commenting. As always, we do want to hear your thoughts. Anything you think we've missed, anything you think we didn't speak about enough, something you noticed you think we might want to spoke about, do comment and let us know. There's loads of videos already talking about Easter eggs and stuff like that. So please do get involved. And if you do like this video, you can, of course, help support us. You can like it, share it if you like this discussion, and subscribe if you want more, because there is going to be more Spider-Man stuff. This is coming out in March next year. On our channel homepage, there is now a Spider-Man review playlist. All the Spider-Man films in a lovely playlist if you are curious about checking out any of those ones. And if you want to find out about other videos, other things that are happening, go get us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinemasavvy with a link to Redbubble in that description below. What else is coming out on the channel? It's summer blockbuster season. Transformers is out on Thursday. Our Mission Impossible reviews continue this Tuesday with Mission Impossible 2. That's going to be up at 8 p.m. And tomorrow morning, there is a review dropping for the new Arnold Schwarzenegger documentary series, which is out on Wednesday on Netflix. So there's a few things happening. It's been very busy, but Spider-Verse has been the big one for this week. Judging off the numbers it's made this weekend, it might be the biggest film out up until Indiana Jones, maybe. So it's going to be a pretty exciting 2 months. But have I missed anything else?
Not that I'm aware of. No. Go watch this film, I guess.
Yes, everyone see it at the cinema. Is well worth watching on the big screen, supporting a film like this. Ayman, of course, thank you for coming on as well, taking time out to do so. It's been a pretty great review. So everyone at home, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.